What's going on, my friend? It's Jeff Newport from ChasingStrength.com. And in today's video, we are discussing part 3 in the series of how can I press the blank kilo kettlebell. We're discussing 5 different strategies you can use to improve your kettlebell press numbers and press that next size kettlebell. All right, let's dive into today's video with a question for you. Have you ever heard of a guy named Pocket Hercules? I'm guessing probably not. Well, here's why that's important to getting a stronger press. Pocket Hercules, also known as Naim Suleymanglou, that's a mouthful, right? Was a 4'11" Olympic weightlifting world champ and Olympic gold medalist and dynamo. This guy was a powerhouse. His moniker, the Pocket Hercules, came from his short stature and his ability to clean and jerk over 3 times his body weight. So he's small yet mighty. What do they say? Like big things come in small packages, right? So one of the things you'll notice as we flash this picture up here is that he's muscular, but not overly so like a bodybuilder. So how did Pocket Hercules achieve the ability to lift such massive loads? Well, 2 words: neural efficiency. He literally created incredibly strong neural pathways that weren't dependent upon muscular size. Now, this comes from the high-frequency training we see inside the sport of Olympic weightlifting. For example, when I was power building and later powerlifting, I squatted once, maybe twice per week. And then when I switched to Olympic weightlifting, I squatted 3 times a week. Heavy. Right. So it's not uncommon, in fact, for Olympic lifters to squat daily, even multiple times per day, which the Bulgarians were noted for doing, right? And coincidentally, Pocket Hercules got his start with the Bulgarian team. So if you ever read Pavel Tsatsulin's Power to the People, he introduced the concept of strong but not big muscle and the style of training, a particular style of training, which was based upon this concept. Okay. And when Power to the People was released back in, I think it was around 2000, it revolutionized the way many, if not most people, thought about training and working out, or at least a small subset. Okay. So you no longer had to be big in order to be strong. Now, unfortunately, for a while, the proverbial baby was thrown out with the bathwater. And that's because the science, #science, right, has shown that there is a direct correlation between the cross-sectional area or size of a muscle and its strength potential. And then what that means for us is that the bigger a muscle, the greater the likelihood it will be a stronger muscle. So what's that mean for you? Well, if you can't partake of high frequency 5-day a week or multiple times a day per training, one of the simplest, time-tested methods to get stronger, pressing that next size kettlebell, right, moving from the 28 kilo or a pair of 28s to the 32 or the 32s, is to simply build more muscle and therefore making your pressing muscles bigger. Now, as a result, assuming you're using intelligent programming, your press automatically increases. I love that word, automatically. Anyway, this sounds so simple, so too good to be true, and yet this is why up until the last 25 years or so, we've always associated big with strong. And yes, we briefly covered this in part 1 of this video series, by the way. Now, before we go any further, you need to know that not all muscle is created equal. Well, what do you mean, Jeff? Well, in fact, when it comes to building muscle to get stronger, there's actually 2 types of muscle. Number 1 is what's typically known as show or fake muscle. And that's the type of muscle that bodybuilders typically train for. Okay, so that's a big muscle that isn't a strong muscle. And that type of muscle size or hypertrophy is called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. The second type is called power muscle or functional muscle, and that's what strength and power athletes typically train for. Now, the difference, okay, is myofibrillar hypertrophy, which is the second power or functional muscle. That happens or occurs when your muscles grow stronger by adding more and bigger myofibrils, right? These are the parts of your muscle fibers that actually make your muscles contract and lift things. We're going to throw a picture up here to show you what this looks like. So just follow along, all right? So when you train with heavier weights and do fewer reps, your muscles build more of these force-producing units, which then boosts your strength and power, hence the term functional. All right, it's muscle that you can actually use. Now, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, on the other hand, works differently. It increases the amount of fluid and stored energy, like glycogen and ATP, right, around the myofibrils inside your muscle fibers. Now, this makes your muscles look bigger, but it doesn't add nearly as much strength. So you usually get this type of growth by lifting lighter weights for more reps and taking shorter rest breaks between sets. Hence the term fake. It's for show, not go. And it doesn't make you considerably or even noticeably stronger. All right. Now, according to Dr. Vladimir Zatsiorsky, who was the chief biomechanicist for the Soviet Union teams from 1980 to 1988, there are 3 methods that you can use starting today to build muscle and strength. The first method is called the repeated effort method. Now, this is the basic training to failure concept, which, as you know, if you've been on this channel for any length of time, I'm not a big fan of, not for guys over 40. Now, it works pretty good. In fact, it works really good if you're like 16, okay, to about 23. And then after 23, point of diminishing returns, okay? Now, this can be used for building go muscle, but it's primarily used for building show muscle, okay? The second method is called the submaximal effort method. Now, this is using submaximal loads for submaximal efforts for multiple sets. So think about 70% of a 1 rep max for 10 sets of 5, for example. That's the submaximal effort method. Now, this method is primarily used for myofibrillar hypertrophy. And then the last and final method is called the maximum effort method. Now, this is lifting to a momentary maximum. So think about achieving a new repetition maximum, a new 1 RM, a new 2 RM, a new 5 RM, that sort of thing, okay? For muscle building and strength building, it's more, especially for muscle building, it's more in the 4 to 6 RM or the 3 to 6 RM range, okay? Now, admittedly, as I just mentioned, this is much more for building strength typically than muscle, but there are some genetic freaks out there, and you may be one of them, who can build muscle with this method, which is why I mention it. But my preferred method for those of us over 40 is the submaximal method, but with a twist. What's the twist? Well, you can think of it as what I call variable density loading. So you're still using submaximal loads based on your RM, a 5 RM or a 10 RM, for example, but your daily work prescriptions are going to change. This becomes a form of variable loading. Now, what is variable loading and why is it important? Well, variable loading was discovered by Dr. Vorobiev, who is himself an Olympic and world champion weightlifter, and his colleague, Professor Ermakov. Okay, they discovered that when loads were sharply contrasted, it produced a 61% greater strength increase when compared to traditional progressive overload models. Now, not only that, when you use this method, you'll do as many reps as you can using specific guidelines and guardrails so you don't overtrain and get injured. Okay. That way you'll be able to measure your progress, like literally measure, see your progress both in the mirror and in your training log from week to week. Plus, you can get a lot of high quality work done, lots of volume, and usually way more than the recommended 12 to 20 plus sets per week. All right. A lot of guys can get that range in a 30-minute session. So this type of training is kind of like a hybrid between neural training and traditional bodybuilding training, but without the extreme soreness, the extreme fatigue, and the fake muscle. In fact, variable density loading is arguably the simplest method I've used to pack on substantial, usable muscle and make my lifts go up without even trying that hard. In fact, it's the backbone of a popular training program I have called The Giant. If you're interested in checking it out, I'll leave a link in the description below this video. Now, you can combine variable density loading with specialized variety, which we covered in the last video for superior muscle growth. And if you want a program that does that, I've also done that for you in a program called the Giant X. And again, I'll leave a link to that program in the video description below. So remember, building muscle, the right kind of muscle, the go, not show muscle, right? Also known as myofibrillar hypertrophy, is also a viable strategy for pressing that next size kettlebell. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, click the like button, smash the subscribe button, share it with a friend you know who's trying to build some muscle and push their press up, and leave me a comment below. Have you tried building muscle, specifically go muscle instead of show muscle, and noticed that your press has gone up? Or have you failed in the past, right? You've done a lot of hypertrophy work, but it was the wrong hypertrophy work and you had nothing to show for it on your max lifts, all right? Specifically your max press, okay? Until next time, my friend, stay strong.